Welcome to the channel English Epics. Many times it's been said, and God knows I've heard it enough, that the best revenge is living well. But for some of us, that just doesn't work. Judging by how family courts tend to rule in favor of women. A man is lucky if he's even able to live at all once the dust settles, let alone live well. I've seen too many guys walk into divorce court and come out beaten, bled dry, and sheared like sheep. No, if I wanted revenge, it had to be something more than just living well. Why did I want revenge? Well, that's my story. Sandy, the woman I lived with for 10 years and the mother of my 2 children, decided to go back to work after Ben, 8, and Mary, 6, started full-day school. She got a job as a parts delivery driver for a large, nationally known auto parts retailer. Her job was to deliver parts from the store to auto repair shops. It seemed like she liked the job and the people she worked with. I met a few of them at her company's Christmas party, and they seemed like a decent bunch. The auto parts store was just a block away from a bar, and once a week, usually on Wednesdays, Sandy would go out for a couple of drinks with her co-workers before heading home. On those nights, I'd make dinner and make sure the kids got to bed on time. A couple of years went by, and Sandy started talking about quitting her job and having another baby. I wasn't thrilled with the idea. I absolutely loved the 2 we already had, but I honestly didn't want another child. I told her I thought 2 was enough, but she kept pressing me for 1 more. Knowing how determined she could be when she set her mind to something, I realized she wouldn't stop pushing until I either gave in and gave her what she wanted, or said something that would bring an instant heavy silence to the house. I tried to avoid getting into a drawn-out argument with Sandy over it, but she was growing increasingly upset about the fact that I insisted on using protection every time we were intimate, and I knew soon enough things would come to a head. Then, my job made me an offer. They asked if I'd be willing to fly to Denver and spend 2 weeks reviewing operations at our office there. I jumped at the opportunity. On my first day in Denver, I called the Family Planning League and got the number of a clinic where I could have a vasectomy done, and by the time I flew back to Detroit 2 weeks later, it was done, and I had the contact information for a clinic where I could complete the necessary follow-up tests. I continued using protection until 2 consecutive tests confirmed that I was sterile. Only then did I raise my hands and say, "All right, Sandy, you win," and handed her the remaining protection, asking her to throw them away. It was a Tuesday, and I had just received the results of my latest test, the first one that confirmed I was infertile. I have no idea why I decided to go home for lunch that day. I almost never did that. But as I turned onto my street, I noticed 2 pickup trucks, parked in our driveway, both with the logo of the auto parts company. I assumed Sandy had come home for lunch and invited one of her co-workers to join her. But the moment I stepped through the front door, I realized Sandy hadn't come home for lunch. Since no one else was home, she clearly hadn't thought it necessary to close the bedroom door, and I heard it as clearly as possible. "Do me, baby. Do me." I was so stunned I just stood there for what must have been a full minute before the sounds from the upstairs bedroom sank in. I heard Sandy begging her lover to keep going. The anger finally broke through into my head, and I clenched my fists as I headed toward the stairs. I was nearly at the top when something in my mind told me to stop, calm down, and think rationally. Divorce was inevitable. There was no doubt about that. But if I stormed into the bedroom, beat the guy half to death, and threw Sandy out of the house, I could end up in jail for assault and battery. And when it came time for court, it would just be a case of, he said. She said. Sure, I might get some personal satisfaction out of it in the moment. But judging by how things tend to go in court, I'd lose in the end. In short, I'd win today's battle, but I'd lose the war. So I quietly walked back down the stairs, as quietly as I could, though with the noise coming from the bedroom, no one would have heard anyway, and slipped out of the house without a sound. Wrote down the license plate numbers of both trucks and drove off. I called work and arranged to take the rest of the day off. Then I headed to the auto parts store and parked where I could watch everything that was going on. At 3 p.m., I saw Sandy arrive, park her truck, and go inside the store. I crossed her truck off my list and kept waiting. 5 minutes later, another truck showed up, but its plate didn't match either of the ones I'd seen at the house. At 3:55, another truck pulled in, and the driver got out. I recognized him from the last Christmas party we attended together. His name was Kevin, and though he didn't know it yet, he had just made a huge mistake by getting involved with my wife. That evening, I called home and told Sandy that I'd have to stay late on a project and that she shouldn't wait up for me. The next morning, I got up and left the house before Sandy woke up. When I arrived at work, I found out the name of a divorce attorney who was said to be quite good, and I scheduled an appointment. He saw me that same day. The news wasn't good. It didn't matter on what grounds I filed for divorce, she would still get half of everything we owned. Most likely, I'd end up paying for her attorney's fees and all court costs. And since I earned more than she did, I would almost certainly be ordered to pay spousal support, which, in our state, is called separate maintenance. On top of that, unless I could prove she was completely unfit, she'd also get custody of the kids, and I'd be paying child support too. It doesn't matter that she's committing adultery. Not at all. The best you can hope for is a sympathetic judge, who might order her to pay for her attorney's fees and half the court costs, and even that would only happen if you have irrefutable proof of her infidelity. If the affair is particularly egregious, it might, and I stress might, help you get custody of the children, but that's highly unlikely. I walked out of his office feeling like I'd been gutted. I was completely screwed, and there was nothing I could do about it. By the time I got home that evening, I had already come to terms with the fact that from a legal standpoint, I was being hosed. But I also decided I didn't have to just lie down and take it. As I pulled into the driveway and parked, I sat in the car for a minute, trying to steady myself. I was about to walk into the house and act like everything was fine. I needed to make absolutely sure that this adulteress had no idea I suspected a thing, and I would play that part until I figured out exactly how to make her pay. 3 weeks later, I received a second test confirming my sterility. As I read, an idea began to form, a way I could get back at Sandy. Kevin was about my height, and his hair was the same color as mine. What if Sandy got pregnant by him? I had lab results proving I was infertile, so a DNA test would clearly show that any child Sandy gave birth to wasn't mine. And if that didn't count as undeniable proof of adultery, I didn't know what would. The question was whether Sandy would let Kevin have unprotected sex with her if I threw away the protection and pretended I wanted another child. I decided we just needed to find out. That evening, I put on quite a show. I took the protection out of the dresser drawer and handed it to Sandy. Here, baby. Throw them away. I've decided to give you what you want. You want another baby? Then let's do it. She threw the protection into the bathroom trash, then pushed me back onto the bed and did something she rarely did. She pleasured me. When I was on the edge, she climbed onto the bed next to me and giggled. Make my belly swell, baby. Blow me up like a balloon. For the next 6 months, we went at it like sex-crazed rabbits. 3 days before her ovulation, the day itself, and the 3 days after, every month, we had sex until I had nothing left to give. During that same 7-day window each month, I drove past the house on my lunch break, and every time, there were 2 company trucks parked in our driveway. But nothing was happening. Either Kevin was just as sterile as I was, or Sandy was making him use protection. Sandy was growing desperate. She wanted that baby and couldn't understand why it wasn't happening. The first 2 times, it felt like all I had to do was walk into the room and look at her, and she'd end up pregnant. I was starting to get frustrated too, not because I wanted the child, but because I wanted to be rid of that cheating adulteress, and I wanted her to be pregnant with someone else's baby when I left. One evening after work, I went out for a beer with one of my best friends from high school. Ron noticed I wasn't my usual self and asked what was going on. I'd had just enough to drink for it all to come spilling out. I told him the whole story, and when I finished, he said, "If you're serious, I'll knock her up for you. I've got 5 kids, and my wife won't even let me touch her unless she's got a diaphragm in. I'm wearing protection, or I swear I'll pull out. How would we do it? Blame her for not being able to get pregnant. Tell her you read an article saying that older women have trouble conceiving because they're not aroused enough. Tell her you want to try some role-playing, mix things up a little, and see if that helps. Then, one night, you blindfold her, tie her to the bed, and we switch places. Try to get her to do it for 3 nights straight, on her most fertile night, and the nights on either side of it. You think it'll work? We won't know until we try." We decided to go for it. That evening, when I got home from work, I asked Sandy if she was sure she had correctly calculated the time when she was supposed to be most fertile. She pulled out the chart she'd made, tracking her temperature and the start and end dates of her periods, and said she was confident she had done everything right. Then it must be something else. While I was waiting for my annual checkup last month in the doctor's office, I read an article in one of those magazines on the table. It said that some women have trouble conceiving, especially after they've had children and then wait a few years before trying for another. One of the theories was that the woman just isn't getting aroused enough during sex. After years of being together, sex, while still enjoyable, becomes routine. I think what we need to do is get you hotter than a forest fire before we make love. How are we going to do that? The article also mentioned a few things you could try, and one of them was role-playing. "So we're going to go out next time you hit your fertility window," I said to her, "and here's what I want you to do. Are you ready?" I asked. "I look like an adulteress. I really hope no one I know sees me like this. You'll be fine." "All right, let's do it," she said, and stepped out of the car. I watched her walk into the bar and thought to myself that she really did look like an adulteress in her short skirt, low-cut top, and 4-inch heels. And I figured that was fitting, because as far as I was concerned, that's exactly what she was. I waited 15 minutes, then followed her in. I spotted her sitting at a table near the dance floor, so I made my way to the bar and took a where I had a clear view of what was happening. Over the next 2 hours, I watched a steady stream of guys buy her drinks and dance with her. I had already told her to let them do whatever they wanted. The goal was to get her worked up, absolutely burning with desire. I saw them touch her ass and her breasts. I saw how much she was enjoying it, like the adulteress she was. Toward the end of the 2-hour session, she stood up and headed to the restroom. One of the guys she had been dancing with got up and followed her. It was almost 10 minutes before she came back, and another 2 minutes after that before he returned, headed straight for the door, and left. I got off my bar stool and walked over to her table. "May I have this dance?" She looked at me, smiled, and said, "I'd love to," and we stepped onto the dance floor. "We need to go," she whispered. "We need to get out of here before I end up doing it, with someone right here on the dance floor. Will this be your first time having sex tonight? What's that supposed to mean? I saw that guy follow you when you went to the restroom. You were gone a good 10 minutes or so. He wanted to have sex with me. He waited for me to come out of the restroom and asked me to pleasure him. I tried to walk past him, but he grabbed my hand and pulled it against himself. And the moment my palm touched him, he messed up my skirt. Nim. Was disgusting that I had to go back into the restroom and use water and paper towels to clean it off. Now please, take me home and have sex with me before I lose my mind." Did I believe her story? Not entirely. If it had happened the way she said, the guy should have come back before she did. Maybe he did it with her. Maybe he didn't. I didn't really care anymore. I just wanted her to get pregnant, and it didn't matter to me whether it was Kevin or Ron who got the job done. Whatever really happened, perversion or something else, It had clearly stirred something in her. I hadn't even turned the ignition key when she was suddenly next to me, unbuckling my belt. It was the first time Sandy had ever pleasured me while I was driving, and it was a unique experience. I tried to stay focused on the road while also relaxing, enough to enjoy the moment. Eventually, I decided to pull over and let her finish the job, but the moment I did, she stopped and pulled away. "No, baby, don't stop. Take me home. I don't want to waste it. I want it to count toward making our baby." She gently stroked me for the rest of the drive, and the moment we got into the house, she started undressing. By the time we made it to the bedroom, she was already naked. I was down to my boxers when she threw back the covers and stretched out on the bed, waiting for me. She was clearly ready when I joined her in bed, whether it was because of desire or something else I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care at that moment. Sandy had always been passionate, and I took full advantage of that, giving her all the energy I had left. What mattered was that, as long as I kept things heated and intense, she'd never suspect I knew anything about what had really been going on. What had happened in the car had already left me pretty drained, so the first time didn't last long. She tried to change things up to help me recover quickly, but I gently stopped her. "No," I said. "Let's just leave things as they are. This time it needs to count." I helped her lie back, placed a pillow under her, and made sure everything was just right for our mission. We were together twice more that night before I finally collapsed beside her and drifted off to sleep. I woke up about 3 hours later and lay there staring at the ceiling. I couldn't understand how she could be the way she was with me, so affectionate, so passionate, and still be doing what she was doing with another man. It never made sense to me. It still doesn't. We did something similar the next 2 times during her fertile windows, but nothing happened. Sandy grew more and more frustrated with each passing month. The next time her fertility was peaking, I said to her, "Tonight, we're going to do something a little different." "What?" "You'll see. Take off your clothes and lie down on the bed." She did as I asked, then looked at me in confusion as I began tying her hands to the headboard. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to try to help you get pregnant," I said as I tied a blindfold over her eyes. "It looks like I can't do it myself, so I asked a friend, a man with 5 kids, to come and help. He doesn't want you to know who he is, which is why you're blindfolded. Your hands are tied so you won't be tempted to peek and see who it is." As I gently placed something soft between her lips, I added, "Now just lie here and be a good girl. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere." I went downstairs and saw that Ron was already undressed and ready. He'd been waiting outside, watching through the window. As soon as Sandy and I had gone upstairs earlier, he entered using the spare key I had given him. "Remember," I said, "no talking. No sounds at all. Just go in, do what you need to do a couple of times, and then we'll switch." I carefully followed him upstairs to the bedroom and froze in the doorway, watching. He walked over to the bed, leaned in, and gently touched Sandy before lying down next to her. Sandy's body trembled as Ron began to move. A moment later, she let out a muffled sound, quiet, yet unmistakably filled with emotion. Several minutes passed. I saw Ron's movements grow more intense, and then suddenly, he went completely still, as if something had just ended. After about 30 seconds, he quietly got up and stepped away. Ron got off Sandy, grabbed a pillow, and placed it under her. He sat on the edge of the bed and gently touched her. She moaned and leaned into his hand. He kept going until he was ready again, and then went for a second round. It took him nearly 10 minutes the second time, and Sandy moaned, moved her legs wildly, and appeared to experience pleasure twice. When he finished, he adjusted the pillow under her again and quietly left the room. Once he was gone, I returned to the bedroom and walked over to the bed. I ran my hands across her. It was important that Sandy believed we were still just playing. "Looks like he really worked you over," I said, removing the gag from her mouth. How did it feel having a stranger do that to you while I was downstairs watching TV? How many times did he do it? You bastard. Untie me, damn it. Untie me, she snapped. I did as she asked. She tore off the blindfold, shoved me back onto the bed, and climbed on top of me. As she lowered herself onto me, she moaned, "That was hot." God, that was so hot. Those first few seconds were clumsy. Oh, I know I've been with her plenty of times after Kevin, but she must have showered after being with him, because she had never felt quite like she did after Ron. Glad you liked him, I said. We're going to do this again tomorrow and the day after. Each time with a different guy. One of them is bound to get you pregnant. Oh God, she moaned. Do it to me, baby. Just do it. And I rolled her over and did exactly that. The next night, we repeated everything. I stood in the doorway and watched. After each round, the guy propped a pillow under her. When he left, I went in and was with her once myself before untying her. As soon as the blindfold came off, she threw herself on top of me and climbed onto my lap. She was amazed I had it in me to go 5 times. Up until that night, my personal record had been 3. What's gotten into you, Tiger? She whispered. You wanted a baby, and I'm just doing my part to make sure you get one. The guy I'm bringing in tomorrow has a specific request. He says I don't need to use the gag this time because he wants to hear you scream his name while he's with you. His name's Ron. Remember that? Oh God, she moaned. Do me, Ron. Do me hard, baby. Make me feel it. Make me forget my husband. I laughed and said, oh, he's going to love that. Yeah, he really will. The next night, everything changed. Ron and I took turns. First him, then I waited just long enough to recover, and then I went again. Then Ron, and then me once more. Through it all, Sandy cried, begged, and screamed as we went through the motions. And the tape recorder captured every moment. 3 weeks later, I got a call at work from a very excited Sandy. It worked, baby. It worked. I'm pregnant. Great news, sweetheart. I'm so happy. And I was happy. I was very, very happy. After hanging up, I opened my file drawer and pulled out the contact information for the private investigator I had already arranged to work with. Tomorrow or the day after should work, I told him. She'll want to celebrate the news. He had already been tracking Sandy and Kevin, documenting their comings and goings, noting the time, and using his report as justification. I gave him permission to enter the house and install hidden cameras in the bedroom. Later, I would stand before a judge and explain that I'd become suspicious and had hired a private investigator to gather proof of Sandy's infidelity. I had audio of her begging Ron to get her pregnant. I had video of her and Kevin together in my bedroom while I was at work. I had the investigator's written report, and eventually I would have the DNA test showing the child wasn't mine. I was as prepared as I could possibly be. All that remained was to wait for the baby to be born, get the DNA test, and deliver justice. Time flies when you don't care, but when you're waiting for something to happen, it drags endlessly. The hardest part was pretending to be a loving husband and devoted father when all I really wanted was to throw Sandy Sarias out of the house. But I wasn't the only one worthy of an Oscar nomination. Sandy was putting on her own performance, playing the role of the loving, devoted wife, all while meeting up with Kevin at our house during lunch breaks 2 or 3 times a week. But Sandy wasn't done pushing me to the edge. She wanted to hit me with one more, final humiliation. At 7 months pregnant, she cut me off. This pregnancy is really tough, sweetheart. It's nothing like the first 2. Not that those were easy, but you know what I mean. I think we should stop being intimate until after the baby is born and the doctor gives us the all clear. Do whatever you feel is best, my love. I don't want anything to happen to you or our baby. Of course, I noticed that Kevin was still allowed to keep doing it up until the 2nd week of the 8th month. I comforted myself with the thought that maybe he wasn't as well equipped as I was. Finally, the big day came, and I drove Sandy to the hospital. I called her mother and 2 sisters to let them know what was happening. Within an hour, her mom and dad joined me in the waiting room, and another half-hour later, her older sister arrived. I was anxiously waiting to find out whether the baby was Kevin's, Ron's, or maybe even the guy from the bar during our little role-playing experiment. The clock in the waiting room seemed frozen. Time wasn't moving at all. Finally, the doctor came out and asked if we could speak in private. I followed him into his office. 5 minutes later, when I stepped back out, Sandy's mother rushed over to me. "What's wrong? Is Sandy okay? Is it the baby? Is the baby all right?" "The mother and baby are both fine. It's a girl, weighs 8 pounds, 10 ounces, and she's got all her fingers and toes. But it seems your daughter has been keeping some secrets from me. She's in the recovery room now, and I'm going to sit with her. You'll be able to see the baby in the nursery in about 5 minutes. I walked into the recovery room and looked at Sandy. She looked terrible, but I suppose that was to be expected when a woman who's 5 feet 1 inch and barely 110 pounds gives birth to a nearly 9-pound baby. When I entered the room, she turned her head away from me. I laughed. I thought it was going to be Kevin's baby, but I guess not, huh? She snapped her head around and stared at me. "Oh yeah, Sandy, I know all about Kevin and your lunchtime meetings at the house. I even have video of what you two were doing in our bedroom, on our bed. I'm sure my lawyer will make sure your lawyer gets a copy of that footage when they sit down to work out the details of the divorce. I'll send your mother in to see you before I leave. Once you're discharged, maybe she or your sister will let you stay with them, because you sure as hell aren't coming back to my house." I turned and walked out of the recovery room, and as I entered the waiting area, her father jumped up and approached me. Did they already sort it all out? How the hell could they make a mistake like that? "There's no mistake, Dad. The doctor assured me that what you saw in the nursery was the result of what your daughter's been doing." He cut the cord himself. "It has to be a mistake. It was her choice, hers and the father's." I walked away from him, and as I exited the hospital, a wide smile spread across my face. Did I mention Ron was black? The divorce was the final blow, and it went in my favor. We split the assets 50-50, but we had a judge who clearly had sympathy for betrayed husbands. The audio and video recordings of Kevin, the audio from the night with Ron, and the fact that the baby was visibly biracial were more than enough for the court to grant me custody of the children. The judge also denied Sandy's request for spousal support and ruled that both parties would cover their own attorney fees and that court costs would be split equally. I walked out of that courthouse with a smile even bigger than the one I wore leaving the hospital. Speaking of hospitals, one evening, Kevin was leaving Taylor's roadside diner when someone attacked him, broke his nose, jaw, and 3 ribs, took his watch and wallet, and kicked him in the head 6 times. He ended up in the hospital. Of course, I had no idea why the police needed to know where I was that night, but they seemed satisfied after Ron and 3 other friends swore that we had been playing poker the entire time in question. Sandy is still working as a parts runner for the auto parts company and currently lives with her older sister, since her father refuses to let her into his house. The court granted her reasonable visitation rights, so I have to deal with seeing her when she comes to pick up the kids. I always try to smile and be polite, keep things cordial. Something along the lines of, "How are you? Still getting along well with Kevin?" I already knew the answer to that question. As soon as Kevin found out Sandy's baby was black, he dropped her like a hot brick. Usually she throws me a nasty look and mutters, "Bastard," just loud enough for me to hear it. And that's when I get to her all over again. I just laugh and remind her that she was the one dumb enough to cheat in her own house, where there was always a chance I might come home and catch her. Then, just to top it off, I'd add, "Oh, by the way, how's your baby doing?" And I'd laugh again as I closed the door. Yeah, maybe the best revenge is living well, but there's still a hell of a lot to be said for just getting even. Thank you for being with us. And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like. It helps new stories come to light.